Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics. It's Monday, exactly 4 o'clock. Don't worry, I'm not going to be doing this at a regular time at 4 o'clock every day. What a weird time. But it's Monday at 4 o'clock, and I've got another Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics episode for you guys. I thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who are listening on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, thank you so much. But also, if you're watching this as a replay, just a reminder, you can always watch this as a podcast on the go. It's on Spotify and Apple and all your favorite podcasting places. And I thank you guys so much for giving us a listen. Now, if you could do me one favor, though, and that is go ahead and hit that share button down there in the corner. Share us out. Share us to multiple places, please. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate people giving us the shares, sharing this podcast with people, listening to it on the go and telling people about it. It's super appreciated, and I really appreciate that support. So please hit the share button for us. Today we're going to be talking about the protests that occurred yesterday on Sunday. Quite some interesting things coming out of it. We're going to be discussing that. We're going to talk a little bit about the governor's race. Coming up in 2 years, there's an article in the Herald Leader about Bevin possibly running as well. And so I would love nothing more than to talk a little bit about that. Not love nothing more than for Bevin to run. I honestly, we're going to talk about how I don't have opinions on who I want to win. But I have opinions on who I don't want to win. And we're going to talk about Joe Biden saying something crazy. Once again, Crazy Joe had some protesters saying, hey, abolish ICE, abolish detention centers. And he was like, give me 5 days, which we're a couple days into 5 days. So I'm wondering what's about to happen. But thank you guys for joining me. Please hit the share button and let's dig into it. Let's talk about the protests yesterday that occurred. So the protests yesterday, we had some counter protesters, of course, that is to be expected as always, sometimes, occasionally, to have some counter-protesters. We did as well. These particular counter-protesters happened to show up 2 hours before us, though. So obviously they missed church. And that's only important. I'm not saying anything about their religious beliefs or anything like that. I'm not saying religious beliefs are necessarily important in this realm. What I'm just saying is what they typically a lot of times will do is attack us, saying, you're not really Christians if you don't believe what I think Christians need to believe. Meanwhile, they're missing church on Sunday. So I don't think they're necessarily a bastion of religious beliefs and standards necessarily, if that's the case, but that's just my humblest of opinions. So Sunday at 2 o'clock, we had this protest. They were there. We showed up about 45 minutes early, and it started already off. And as a lot of you know, there was, of course, a lot of fiery language coming from over there, a lot of swear words, a lot of terrible things said by them as well. And a lot of personal attacks, right? And here's the thing. We make fun of the governor from time to time, of course, and we're going to, there's some times where I say some fiery rhetoric too, and some people even had issue on our side with some of the fiery rhetoric I was saying. I apologize if I offended everybody, but, I think for a minute we have to realize what we're dealing with here, okay? I personally believe... This is my personal beliefs. You can feel free to disagree with me, but my personal beliefs are the governor has killed people. The governor has traded lives, not saved lives. He's decided some lives are more important than others. I honestly believe that because he's decided to close everything down for COVID, not caring about the mental health of younger people, not caring about the long-term effects that has on younger people, resulting in historic highs of overdose deaths. And for those who don't realize where the overdose deaths come from, it comes from people in recovery need a job to find purpose a lot of times. That's part of their recovery. And for those of you who want to say, oh, well, you're just using this drug issue to further your political opinion, I'm a second chance employer. I have hired second chance employment. I have literally set up recruitment tables to hire people out of recovery clinics because I believe in giving people second chances that much. So you can't sit there and say, I don't care about it when I understand the process. Why do you think I understand so much about how the recovery process works? It's because I have dealt with people in recovery. I know the ups and downs that comes with that. I know the bads and goods. There's a lot of bads that go with it too. You're going to be screwed over by a lot of different employees in the process. And so because of that, I understand getting a job and working a job is a very important part of the process that they have. And so I believe the governor, by closing down indoor dining, which a lot of these people in recovery work in the restaurant field, has killed people. I certainly believe by deciding to leave open, by deciding to close what he deemed was elective surgeries because they were worried about COVID overruns, he has killed people. He has caused people like my friend Ken to live more difficult lives because they couldn't get some of the surgeries they needed at the time they needed them, causing bigger issues. I believe that he has left open abortion clinics, and that has, when he had closed other elective procedures, and I believe that was wrong to do. I believe he has caused suicides of people I know, of other business owners in this state who have lost everything due to no fault of their own, that felt lost. And so they ended up taking their own life. I believe he has killed people. In his attempt to save maybe one group, he has killed others. And I've said it before on this podcast that, morally speaking, if a boulder's rolling down a mountain, it's headed towards a town of 1,000, and you can choose to redirect it, but you're going to take out a town of 100. What should you do? And my moral belief is you shouldn't do a thing because you didn't start that boulder rolling. But the minute you touch that lever and you redirect it, you have now decided who lives and dies, and that's morally corrupt. And that is not your place as an individual. As one individual, it's not your job to decide who lives and dies. And I think that is if you say it's even direct. I say there's a lot of evidence that says just as many, if not more people, have died from the lockdown policies than would have been saved by those policies from COVID. I believe that is certainly the case. And so if you believe that, and then also you have people like myself losing their ABC license. Now, it's not destroying our business, but there's 80 other businesses who are losing their ABC licenses right now, due to these mandates and issues like that. That's their entire businesses gone. That's just that. 25% of small businesses gone. Snap of a finger, gone. So not only has he killed people, but he's also cost people the entire things they've worked for their entire lives, which was not his place. And I'll go into in a second, because people out there, I had a good conversation with somebody actually at the end from the other side, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But more importantly, if you truly believe that, like I do, sometimes I'm not going to care about hurting people's feelings. Sometimes I'm going to say things such as Andy sucks and make fun of him and do things to that man who I believe has destroyed so many people's lives. And if you don't truly believe that, I can understand why you would feel something against it. But if you believe like I do, he has caused undue harm to the state of Kentucky by taking a moral position that wasn't even his to take in the first place, behaving in a way not prescribed to him by the Constitution, and that our government should even take the role of in the first place. You don't play nice all the time. He has caused damage. This is the time to stand up, and it is the time to fight. No matter who you are, this is the time to stand up for what you believe in. This is not the time to lay down. And if you can look around at all the damage going on and say, I don't want to stand up and fight, or I'm worried about hurting some feelings if I say the wrong thing sometimes, I challenge you to look around at what's going on. You're not taking it serious enough. Maybe I'm wrong, though. Maybe I'm wrong, but I at least if you feel like my fiery rhetoric sometimes got out of line, that's where it's coming from. I believe he's killed people. When you believe somebody's killing people, how do you respond? I mean, of course, the other side, I'm not going to respond like the other side now, because the other side cusses and swears and degrades and goes to personal attacks because they believe we're killing people. They believe by us saying you get to have a choice of what you get put in you or not is killing people. To the point that we had quite a lot of issues yesterday, one of which is one of the members of, I don't know what you want to call it, the Brood Crew, I guess, recording for the protest for us, got a knife pulled on him. We have video dropping for that. Should be later today at around 8 o'clock tonight. You should expect to see that video dropped, where we have that instance there. We're doing some other. We're putting in that with a bunch of other clips of all the bad behavior. We had one of them pushed, shoved, his camera broken. Outside of the terrible language, we had a small child that was holding a sign that said, why do you want to force to put in me what you have in me? And I guess he was near one of the other protesters and asked, why do you want to force me to take a vaccine? And the protest, this child was like 10, threw up a camera in his face, and cameras in your face isn't assault or anything. I'm not saying it was. And I'm not saying that if an adult is there and you want to throw a camera in their face, throw a camera in their face. It's fine. But, it's like an 8, 9, 10-year-old child. And though, yeah, it can be sometimes unfair to have children asking you this question, but that's what you want to do. I mean, that's what these people want. They want to put something in this child the child doesn't want in them. And so it's an honest question in that sense, and they would do it in a heartbeat. And so the point is their behavior completely out of line. They call us animals, and they pretend we're the selfish ones, and they care about others and everything else. And their behavior was atrocious. And we're going to be showing those videos today of all their behaviors, how terrible they were. Because I tell you what, I want to be proud of myself at all. My mama was watching that video later, and she said, they better be glad Mama Bear Cooperrider wasn't there. Because some of the things they were saying, Mama Bear would be like, no, sir. No, thank you. And there's some weird comments, too. Even on the live, there's weird comments where people are like, oh, this guy talking, he probably never gets laid. It's like, that's such a weird comment. I'm like married with a child. Like, what a weird thing to say about somebody who's married and has children. But anyways, the point is, I think my wife's pretty hot, too. But, that's me. But anyways, the thing is, though, is there are levels I will never stoop to when it comes to dealing with the other side. Not when it comes to political figures. You get into the political realm, you make decisions that kill people, you make decisions that destroy lives. There's still a line I won't stoop to. I won't go to violence as long as I have a political means prescribed to me by the Constitution that's available to me, such as courts, protests, things like that, that we have not fully fulfilled out, certainly not fully fulfilled out at all. We have elections and a lot of other choices. So I will not personally go to violence at all. But if you're an individual and we're engaging in politics, there's things I won't stoop to. So one of the things I won't stoop to, and I've gotten into actually arguments with some of my supporters about before, they've been wanting to do it, and I was like, man, that's not cool, is I will not try to get somebody fired. I will not try to sit there and call up somebody's employer and be like, check out this terrible individual you have hiring for you, try to getting them fired. Because political disagreements, at the end of the day, they are political disagreements. And though Andy has made decisions that have killed people and everything else, these individuals, though they support Andy, they weren't the ones who made that decision. They're the ones who are, I guess you would say, brainwashed or so worried about what jersey the other team's wearing and what moniker's next to them, they can't call them out for it. And it's real funny, too, when they try to be like, oh, Bevan was doing the same thing. You wouldn't have a problem with it. Yeah, I would. I would have a problem with it. In fact, we're going to talk about running for governor here in a second, and you'll hear that my standards do not waver. I do not care what initials next to their name is. Most of you guys who follow us know I will call out Republicans and Democrats both. I don't care what team they're on at all. But I will not try to get somebody fired. That's just me, right? I won't try to do it. But yet the other side already trying to call somebody that actually kind of works for us, and trying to call one of their old employers because they still thought that they worked there, being like, did you know that they're a terrible person and here's a terrible thing about them and everything else? And that prior employer reached out to him and was like, what the heck's going on? And it's like, not only is that silly because they kind of work for us / work for themselves, and there's a lot of freedom that comes with being unable to be fired for a job, but also as well, that's a level I personally won't stoop to. And I know one time I got into a comment conversation with somebody saying, well, if you're willing to stoop to that level, then you'll never win. And it goes, if I've got to betray my principles in order to win, then I haven't won at all. right? I do have certain principles, and for whatever reason, because I'm fighting for people to be able to keep their livelihoods and keep their jobs and have freedom from the government and have the freedom to speak their minds and everything else, because of that, and that's what I'm fighting for, I won't ask for somebody else to be fired. Because if in my process of fighting for people's livelihoods, I decide I want to remove people from their jobs, what am I fighting for? That's the opposite of what I'm fighting for. So that's kind of some things. And like I said, the protest, we'll be dropping some videos about that there. And I hope I have everyone's support. And if I've lost anybody's support through that process or what I'm saying, I'm sorry. But it is what I believe. And I hope you'll continue to support us as well. And you can support us by visiting the coffee shop, of course. You can also go to brewedco.com, brewedco.com. If you like what we're doing, where we're getting these videos done, I'd love to get out there more. I'd love to get involved more with, like they had the Bernie Sanders and Charles Booker rally. I'd love to have sent somebody up there with a camera and just kind of record some fun interviews, things like that. If you guys want to support that kind of work here in Kentucky, fighting the line of these crazy liberals, not just the liberals or the Democrats or what have you, but there are crazy ones out there, like the handful that are out there counter protesting, then certainly please support us at donate.brewedco.com. I'm not going to spell that. Donate.brewedco.com. Also, please give us a share. Hit that share button down there as we go in here. I want to talk about a conversation I had after the fact. Now, I had a conversation after the fact with one of the counter-protesters after things had calmed down, and I think we had a real good conversation. One of the things they asked is, well, what would you do? What would you do? I tell you guys what, if that's a fair question. If you're going to come out here and you're going to have problem with something somebody's doing, you better have a realistic, legal solution. And I do. In case of a pandemic, where there's a pandemic spreading, our founding fathers actually thought of this situation. And it's called the Fifth Amendment Takings Clause. And it makes very clear that essentially there will be times where the government needs to take your property from individuals, from citizens, and they need to do it for the quote-unquote greater good of the nation. However, to do it, in the Fifth Amendment Takings Clause, it is wrote that they have to properly compensate you first. So our founding fathers thought of this situation, and they provided a remedy. Now, why that remedy is so important, and this is what I was telling her about, and I think when she realized what I was saying, she's like, actually, it makes a lot of sense to what you're saying. Basically is if the government has to come in and close a restaurant due to the pandemic, then they have to compensate that restaurant owner and those employees for their lost revenues, for their personal revenues as far as labor money you'd make, and also individual revenues of the restaurant owner. They have to figure out a way to compensate that equally, not just let the business close, or not a loan, not an EIDL loan, not a PPP loan. No, full up money given out. And those people are like, that sounds like government handout. It's not. It's prescribed. Fifth Amendment Takings Clause. But it creates an incentive. And it creates an incentive to not have these vast policies like Governor Beshear has had, where he's closing entire industries or saying you can't get a beer past midnight because nobody's forcing it. It's not costing the government anything to say that. It doesn't cost them anything to say you can't get a beer past midnight. It doesn't cost them anything to really close down restaurants because they are still making their money through sales tax. Actually, their money went up through the pandemic. The state's receipts went up here in Kentucky during the pandemic because people had more money the government was just giving them, the individual workers, or they're at home and they got nothing else to do but spend money, and so they're collecting more in sales tax. But the small businesses that they had closed were the ones who were closing. They were shrinking. And so the government has no incentive to get them open. However, if under the Fifth Amendment Takings Clause, you have to pay that business owner when you close them every week or every day they're closed, and their staff every day and every week they're closed, you now have an incentive to figure out a way to get them open and operating at full capacity as quick as possible. And that creates now not a one-size-fits-all solution, but you're going to go around to individual restaurants, businesses, and everything else and figure out a way that you can get them open. Whether that is, there's filtration systems we can install here to get the air circulating better in the room, and that'll make it safer. Okay, that's what we're going to get done here, so that way you can be open, you can be operating, and we're going to move on because we need to get people open because we can't afford to keep paying you to close. That's the proper way to have handled it. And that creates, once again, the government incentive to not step on your liberties because it's going to cost them dearly. But of course, that didn't happen. And of course, though that's what should have happened, to pass a lawsuit now, not a court in this land will grant, because it will literally bankrupt the government. Because the government can't afford, Bashir, the state of Kentucky cannot afford to compensate the 25% of small businesses' loss. Because we're talking about sometimes, if their future revenues and everything else, we're talking about millions per business. We're talking about probably more money than the state brings in 10 years they owe out. They have cost the country and the state that much money through their decisions. And so in that conversation with that individual, they started seeing not only, we're not just complaining, we have solutions. We have the way they should have handled things, and they didn't do it. They didn't follow the proper process given out in the Constitution to do something. Right? And then on top of that, they're now not giving the voice over to the branch of the people, the legislators who've duly passed laws. Those now are getting held up in court. And so we're not crazy protesting. And a lot of times, and so, you know, a lot of you know we have a common commenter. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not going to give him fame, but he happened to be there. And I said, hey, instead of keyboard worrying all the time, let's have a debate right now. Later on in the day when I called him out for it back on the Facebooks, he said, well, that's because we don't have any common ground because I believe in science and facts. So first off, I forgot the part of debate that says we have to agree before we can debate. I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. But on top of that, we're not debating the same thing. You're over here talking about science and facts and all these other things. I don't even want to debate about that. Though I have my own opinions on that, and I believe right now the government isn't following science, but rather the government is doing things and then they're using science to try to justify their actions. I think it's a reverse policy that's going on right now. However, I don't want to debate the science on it. I don't want to debate where the virus came from. I don't want to debate whether it's a big control or not. It's simply put, this is the government's role as prescribed by the Constitution. They need to follow that role. If you think that's not the government's role, you have to provide me the constitutional and legal reasons why it's not. Don't tell me about how many people are dying from COVID. That's not the discussion. The discussion is what is government's role in this? That's the discussion. And I think that's part of the problem, too, is there's a lack of understanding. Yes, there's times where we make fun of the science when it's crazy or stupid or it's clearly being manipulated to try to justify their actions. But really, I don't want to debate with you over whether 6,000 people have died from COVID really, or 1,000 people have died from COVID really, or 10 people have died from COVID really. I don't want to debate about that. That's not what I want to debate about. I want to debate about what is government's role in a pandemic. What is it, actually? And it's, I believe, prescribed in our Constitution. And there's actually case law about it, certainly around polio, too, as well. And those are things that we can look at, and I believe, that we can follow. And that's what we want to debate about. But, of course, they don't want to debate about that because they'd rather stand on the graves of these individuals and claim moral superiority than to discuss about government tyranny because they will lose. They will lose. So, of course, they don't want to debate, and, of course, a lot of them turned it down. So, make sure you guys are bringing solutions when you come on out. Now, let's talk about the governor's race. And I want to talk about it because I had this conversation with an individual who came up and said, was talking to me about the governor's race, and I'm, to be honest, they were talking to me about wanting me to run for governor. And I'll tell you guys this much right now, I'm not going to run for governor. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it for a couple reasons. But first off is I want to make real long-lasting change. And I want to make real long-lasting change here in Kentucky. And real long-lasting change is done in the legislature. That's where you pass laws that typically, unless you're Bashir and Shepard, that's where you pass laws that change the situation. Because let's remember, we didn't get here because Bashir is our governor. We got here because Bashir is the type of person that will take advantage of the laws and regulations and situations that have been created over the last decades here in Kentucky and nationwide. The laws and the constant eroding of liberties and rights and your ability to be free from government, your ability to be free from their claim on your life, liberty, and property, and that erosion over time is how we got here. Bashir isn't how we got here. Our complacency, our laying down, our lack of ability to pay attention to what is our rights and then fight for them is how we got here because it was just a minor inconvenience before. But now when they're taking your livelihoods, it's a lot bigger of a deal. So I personally am not interested in running for governor. Just to say that. to anybody who was hoping I might. If I ever run for anything, it'd probably be in the legislature. Just telling you guys right now, that's where real long-lasting change is done. And that's I want to get real long-lasting change done here in Kentucky that is permanent and goes on for a while. That being stated, of course, naturally, a lot of people want to know who's going to run for governor, because I think the general belief, and I think it's correct, is whoever wins the Republican primary is probably our next governor, because Beshear is hated. I mean, he's booed. He can't get more than like 10 supporters out there for him on a counter protest. Like, he is not liked. This story of Brood and me is not as much about me and Brood, but more so about how many people hate Beshear. And so who do we have here? We got a lot of people talking about governor. The Herald Leader ran an article recently talking about Bevin running for governor and talk about whether or not he would. They talk about Damian Thayer, who was mentioning Kelly Craft was somebody. Let's see, mega donor, Republican mega donor Kelly Craft. Of course, she donates a lot of money to the party. Agricultural Commissioner Ryan Quarles, Jamie Comer. Of course, a lot of people know about Savannah Maddox, Harmon as well, wanting to run. And right now I want to give you guys a piece of advice. Do not pick who you want to run and win as governor now. Just start deciding who you don't want to support, okay? As people come up, just look at their past, look at their histories, look at what they've done, and decide and just say, I know I don't want to support this person. That's my suggestion, because we're still 2 years out. We're a long ways out, and you make that choice. Now, I would have some cautions I want to give you guys. Okay, just some cautions I want to give you guys as you're looking at who do you want to be governor. First, watch out for supposed liberty people. Hopefully, if you're listening to this podcast and you support me, you love liberty. And so watch out for supposed liberty people. I'll give you an example. If a person says they're going to be a liberty governor, and then in their first couple of minutes of talking, they say they're going to make executive orders, they're not a liberty governor, okay? If you think you're going to make executive orders your first days in office, and you're going to do sweeping things, like get rid of abortion and Second Amendment sanctuary and these sweeping things from the governor's office through an executive order, you're not a liberty legislator. Now, a lot of you are like, Andrew, those sounds like things you would support. Why don't you want them to happen? I absolutely do want them to happen. But remember what I just said. Long-lasting, real change is done from the power of the legislator. If our governor gets in there, whoever the Republican is, he starts writing executive orders to get rid of abortion, Second Amendment sanctuary state, and all those things, that sets a precedent that then if a Democrat governor ever gets in there, which might happen, you can't say forever, it's going to be Republican. If a Democrat governor gets in there, they can undo all those things with the stroke of a pen as well. And then more importantly, they can go in the opposite direction with the stroke of a pen. It's much harder because you don't just have to convince one person who gets in office to do something. Instead, you have to convince around about, if you want laws changed, 69-ish people in the legislature to do something if you want to get laws changed. It's a lot harder to do. So if you want real change done, it's done in the legislature, once again, but also as well, if you're going to sit there and say, I'm making executive orders from the governor's office and that's how I'm going to get things done, you're not for liberty. You need to respect the separation of powers. That's who we have now as somebody who doesn't respect separation of powers. And once again, I don't want to change a dictator I disagree with for a dictator I agree with. Because guess what? They're both dictators. And if you have principles and you're a principled individual, you don't care whether or not somebody's doing something you agree with. You just know it's wrong. It's wrong to do it. It needs to happen this way. I honor the process of doing it. And I hear you guys saying, once again, but God, Andrew, that's what the other side is doing. I hear you. I hear you. I understand your pain. But once again, if you're willing to give up your principles to win, you haven't won it all. You haven't won it all. So watch out for supposed liberty individuals that then want to make executive orders. And also, too, as well, I'm not saying you're common man who's never been in office, and you're going to have a lot of those. I've ran across like 4 that you guys won't know their names over the past like 2 weeks. They're like, I'm running for governor, and they're like a common man. I'm not saying a common man can't be a good governor. I think absolutely a common man can be a good governor. However, I would want to see that common man to have done something in their common man life to have shown that they have some kind of leadership, whatever that may be. I don't know what that looks like, but I like to see that. However, make sure the common man understands how government works. Make sure that they, know what the role is of the governor. They know what's a federal thing and what's a state thing. What can they actually make a difference on and what they can't. And make sure they have an actual policy position. What do I mean by that? Well, saying, I want to end abortion in Kentucky is not a policy position. That is a statement of beliefs. A policy position is, I want to end abortion in Kentucky, so I want to pass this bill, and this is what this bill will do. That is a policy. Saying, I want to lower taxes, that's, I guess, a goal, but that's not a policy. A policy is, I want to lower taxes, and I want to do that by ending the income tax in Kentucky. Boom. That's a platform. That's a real platform, right? A platform is not just, I want to lower taxes. That's not a platform. That's not it. So watch out for that too as well out of your common man runners. And when they say, I want to do this for Kentucky, great. How are you going to do it? And if they can't tell you how they're going to do it exactly, I'm going to make this policy happen, or I'm going to work with the legislators to get this bill wrote and passed. And then if they don't say that, they're not a good choice. And if they say, well, I'm going to write an executive order, if you're for liberty, as I said earlier, they're also not a good choice. Just saying that. Now, also, though, watch out for your establishment hacks. They're going to try to take advantage of how upset everybody is, this wave of discontent, that they're going to try to take advantage of it when they're establishment hacks, and they always have been. What do I mean by that? Well, establishment hacks are individuals that, of course, obviously we're watching for their ties to Mitch McConnell. But they're going to do the same things that establishment hacks have always been done. And we want to make sure a situation like Governor Beshear never happens again. And we do that by making real long-lasting changes. And an establishment hack, doesn't want to make that change because they want to wield that power. They don't have a problem with the power. They have a problem with who's wielding the power. I have a problem with the power. And if you're for liberty and you're standing up for the Constitution, then you have a problem with the power, not just who's wielding it. So that would be my suggestions. And like I said, we're still 2 years out. I don't think I don't want, my suggestion would be, once again, do not decide who you're supporting. We're 2 years out. Decide who you're not going to support and keep an open mind and listen to who's out there and who's doing it. Because like I said, people are going to be trying to look for riding on waves of discontent, and just stay on the lookout for it. Now, on the national level, Joe Biden talking all kinds of crazies. I don't know if you guys missed it or if you guys saw it, but he was, I think he was at a speech or something, and he had some protesters, hecklers saying, abolish ICE, abolish the detention centers. And Joe Biden responded to them saying, hey, I'm on your side. I'm trying. Just give me 5 days, which I want to know what's going to happen here soon. Like, is ICE getting dissolved and we just found out about it for that? Or what is happening there? That's my first question. My second question is I thought old Sleepy Joe was supposed to be a moderate. Does abolishing ICE and detention centers sound like a moderate to you? That sounds like a pretty severe action to do. It seems pretty huge. But that leads me to want to talk about immigration policy. A lot of people say, what would be an immigration policy that I think I would be personally content with on a liberty aspect. And I think it should be insanely easy. By that, I mean, you need to get your background check done. It needs to be securely done. We need to make sure you're not coming from anywhere. We don't want any terrorists, obviously drug dealers, those kinds of people coming across the border. So one, immediately, my personal opinion on immigration, we need to lock down that border. It is border security. We do not need terrorists. We do not need other people going on. I was talking with an individual that works for the RNC national level, and they were just down in Texas talking to Governor Abbott. And I guess as they're describing it, what they do is they do a couple of things. First off, these children crossing the border are apparently they are severely mistreated. They are sexually abused. I mean, this is not good to be letting them cross the border like this because it leads to this kind of behavior. But what they do is they send unaccompanied minors across, and they try to send them across in one area, large groups, overwhelming the border control there. So while they're there, overwhelming the border control, then at somewhere else close by but out of sight, they get across the drugs, the terrorists, the other things that they don't want happening. And people are going to be like, terrorists crossing the border, that's nonsense. Like, literally, they are catching terrorists pretty often, crossing the border. And those are the ones they are catching. It's actually a huge problem. And so one is we need to immediately secure our borders. That is obviously very important. But we also need to secure our borders, and what can help in that security of being very severe, I think, is if we had a very obvious entry process that is simple and easy to get into the country. We background check you, everything else, but it's like not a long process, like a day or 2, 3 days, whatever. We process it. You get a taxpayer identification number so you can pay taxes, and you can come into the country. Now, you can't be a citizen, but you can come into the country, you can work, play by the same rules as all of us, and pay your taxes. And the job market of what we have available as far as job-wise go will dictate whether or not there's space for you in the country. I think that will naturally resolve if people want to come to the country, because people only want to come to the country to have a better life. Well, if you don't have a job to come to because the labor market can't handle you, then turn around, go home. We have nothing for you. And then as well, I think it would be important to say if in those years, and I think Mexico does this, Canada does this, a lot of people does this, if at any point you need help with government assistance in your first 10 years here or 5 years here, however long you want to make it, you have an issue where you need to be on government assistance, you get deported. That's what Canada does. That's what Mexico does. That's what a lot of these countries do. They say, come in, but if you need help from us, you need government assistance from us at any point in your first years here, you got to go back because we can't have you be a drag in our system. I think that's fine. And I think that's a good middle-of-the-road, common ground kind of situation, because if you're worried about them taking jobs and overflowing the job market and things like that, well, if they're playing by the same rules, then your only problem is you believe immigrants are going to work harder than you, and that says more about you than it does that immigrant. Maybe you should work harder, right? But if they're playing by the same rules, then you shouldn't be concerned over if they're coming in or not. If they're paying their taxes, they're paying their way, they're not dragging down the system, they're not on welfare, they're not getting food stamps, they're not getting Medicare and Medicaid, all those things, they're not dragging on the system. And you're providing them the opportunities, though. On the other side, for people who are like, America needs to take care of everyone and everything else, well, hey, it gives them a way to come into the country and work. And that's what you're super worried about. Now, they can't vote yet. They're not citizens, right? They need to be in the country for a little while before they become citizens, in my opinion, so they can vote. And that's what citizenship would come with, full citizenship. So let's say you're here for 10 years, you're working on a number, you're paying your taxes, you're paying your way, you're playing by the same rules as all of us, and then you can get your citizenship, which comes with voting. And then if you do end up needing Medicare, Medicaid, or falling on hard times or things like that, then you get welfare system help. But after you've been here for a while. That's just my personal opinion on immigration. That's how I think it should work. You guys may disagree, and that's okay. We can talk about that. If you have a different opinion on it, reach out to me. Let's talk about it. But I definitely don't think we should be abolishing ICE and detention centers right now. But apparently, Sleepy Joe's gone all kinds of crazy. That's what it looks like to me. Well, that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. Please stop by the coffee shop, Brewed, here in Lexington. Buy our coffee online, brewedco.com. Go to, if you want to support us, like I said, we're trying to get together a lot of great things. Go to donate.brewedco.com. Show your love, show your support. Throw $10 my way. Throw $20 our way. You know, give monthly. I don't know. But thank you guys for joining me. Once again, please share this out. I thank you guys so much.